As the last alliance of Earth's heroes make their way deeper and deeper inside the celestial god, not even Jean Grey herself will be able to avoid Judgment. What'll happen next? Well, let's hop into the pages of A.X.E, X-Men #1 and find out together, shall we? So then, as we join the book, Jean and the last holdouts of the Marvel superhero community are still trying to find that elusive node that's going to allow them to destroy this rampaging celestial god who wants to undo the entire world that doesn't live up to its standards. This issue actually does a really good job bringing up two facts that I had forgotten. One, a lot of people have died already, and just because the Eternals and X-Men have found ways to cheat death, even after they defeat the Celestial, there's going to be a lot of cleanup to do. Sinister and the others theorize that maybe they can briefly take control of the Celestial's amazing godlike powers and turn back the clock. But hey, you know what they say about absolute power corrupting absolutely, right? But it looks like that's going to have to be a bridge they all cross when they get to it. The second thing this issue reminds me is that the Celestial God's body, where everybody is running around right now, is very literally where the Avengers had been making their home for the entirety of the Jason Aaron run, meaning that they come upon some landmarks that they recognize. The innards of the Celestial is an ever-twisting maze, but the heroes feel that if they're going to get to the node, they're going to have to make it past the god's atomic heart, and the only way they're going to do that is if Jean Grey uses her powers to split the small sun's worth of power aside. Here's the thing though, exerting that much energy herself leaves her mind open to the progenitor to get inside, meaning it's time for her to face her own judgment. Much like Tony in the previous tie-in issue, instead of having to deal with a single ghost from her past, Jean essentially goes on an entire walking tour of her superhero career and her past sins. We see a young version of her fighting the original X-Men inside the Danger Room, the idea being that the X-Men have to have a bunch of different contingencies in mind in case Jean ever goes rogue, something that certainly probably irked her for years. Then of course there's everything that happened with the Krakoan Council not even that long ago when Emma Frost and the others almost risked killing many humans if it meant destroying the Celestial Node originally. Jean blames herself, figuring that if she still had her seat on the Krakoan Council, she might very well have been able to sway them away from such possibly destructive action. But as the Celestial is quick to remind her, she wasn't on the council. When things got too hot, she ended up walking away, choosing rather to be a hero than maybe actually make a difference. In fact, if we want to extrapolate further, she basically did the same thing with X-Force too. She was there for a little bit, but then when she didn't like the direction, she walked away instead of trying to change the direction from inside. Perhaps on some level, Jean desperately wants to be liked, even if it means doing harm inadvertently. Now here's where Jean's test is actually different from Iron Man's though. You see, because Jean is such a powerful psychic, Logan and Mr. Sinister are actually allowed inside her brain. They help fight past a bunch of the progenitor's illusions until eventually they are all brought before the creature for one final trial, because isn't that always the case with poor Jean Grey? She's always on trial for something. Here's the crazy part though, the Celestial actually forces both Wolverine and Sinister to tell the truth. For Logan, it's obvious. He's loved her, he's always loved her. He trusts her and knows she'll do good. In fact, the Celestial says in a nice bit of continuity he heard much the same from Cyclops, who even said that the progenitor should be afraid of someone like Jean. But perhaps the most interesting bit of commentary actually comes from Sinister himself, who is forced to tell the truth. He says that he's tried to clone Jean Grey many times, but it's never worked out because she is such a singular, one-of-a-kind being. The Celestial God admits that it's had a hard time thinking about its judgment for Jean Grey because she does seem to contain so many multitudes within her. She has done a lot of good, but she's also done a lot of evil too, destroying whole planets as the Phoenix, which, you know what, Jean admittedly gets pretty pissed off about, saying that she lives her whole life trying to make up for the sins of the Dark Phoenix, yet no one can ever seem to let them go. Hell, just a couple arcs ago in the main X-Men book, Jean helped liberate hundreds of worlds from a casino planet, and yet still people are throwing the worst thing she's ever done on the worst day of her life in her face. As the progenitor goes on to say, the other X-Men would have saved those worlds from the casino planet, but if there was no Jean, there would be no Dark Phoenix, and the planet that she destroyed would still be around. So yeah, Jean actually ends up getting a failing grade from the progenitor. She is alive though and still gets the chance to fight another day. Wolverine comforts her by saying that any god that would give him a passing grade and her a failing grade is a pretty messed up god, not worth giving much thought. And if anything, Jean is now more motivated than ever to take down this Celestial once and for all after seeing what a horrible hypocrite it is. In In fact, Wolverine even ends the comic by saying that Jean was always the golden child, the favorite student of Xavier. She's not used to failing tests. And so that was A.X.E. X-Men issue number 1, everybody. And I gotta say, as far as tie-ins go, this still isn't necessary reading to understand what's going on in the greater Judgment Day story, but it is a fascinating tie-in. In fact, I would say I actually like this one more than the Iron Man one from last week. Again, not even so much for what it does for the main character that the story is focusing on, in this case Jean Grey, but for what it actually does for the Celestial Progenitor, deepening and further exploring what makes it tick. In the previous tie-in issue, it let Iron Man off the hook for all of his sins because, well, the Progenitor and Iron Man actually had a lot in common. And yet here we see that the Progenitor also has a lot in common with Jean Grey. They both have godlike powers, they both have the ability to destroy worlds, and yet here the Progenitor punishes Jean. I think the implication here that Kieran Gillen is running with is that the Celestial Progenitor's judgments really aren't based on any steadfast rules or logic about the person that it's judging. If anything, the Celestial is kind of working through its own shit by judging people. The Celestial gave Tony a passing grade because it liked the things in him that it liked about itself, but with Jean, she got a failing grade because Jean reminds the Celestial of all the things it hates about itself. It's a fascinating dichotomy, and I'm actually more interested than ever now for the Eternals tie-in that's coming next. How does the Celestial feel about those who are meant to worship it? Overall, I think I'd feel comfortable giving this one a 7.5 out of 10. Again, you don't need to read it, but as far as tie-ins go, this one was actually probably one of the better ones.
Hey there everyone, Cape Joel again, and I want to thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. As always, if you liked what you see, be sure to like, subscribe, comment. It really helps drive engagement and helps me out too. Also, if you are a patron, which you can become for as little as $1 a month, you will get exclusive content that no one else can ever see, and you'll get to see the Comic Multiverse podcast before anyone else too. You can check out all this and more down in the description. And until next time everyone, this has been Cape Joel, and I'll see you all next time. Cheers.